You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. What a week this has been, starting with the first debate and moving on through the Women's Media Center annual awards. Wow. But we've got a strong show for you nonetheless. Two terrific guests. Jessica Bennett is here. She's a New York Times reporter who decided to write a manual about how to survive in a sexist workplace, and she's made it into a book, and it's called Feminist Fight Club. And my second guest will be White Mukuria, who has founded an NGO in Africa that addresses the need of young girls there and elsewhere who live in the developing world and who can't go to school once they get their first period because they lack menstrual hygiene products. So both those stories are coming up, and also the second part of my open letter to millennials at the end of the program in Fighting Words, although the entirety of the open letter is posted on womensmediacenter.com. But right now, we need to go inside the headlines. In keeping with my ongoing attempt to cover stories other than the election in this part of the program, we'll do the election later, here are two stories that I think did not get the attention that they deserve. One of the biggest worldwide public health triumphs in recent years has been maternal mortality. Global death rates fell by more than a third between the year 2000 and 2015. But the U.S. is one of the few countries in the world that have gone in the other direction, new data shows. There were 28 maternal deaths, defined as deaths due to complications from pregnancy or childbirth, per 100,000 births in the United States in 2013. That's up from 23 in 2005, the Institute found. The Institute being the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. It's a research group funded by the Gates Foundation and based at the University of Washington. The rate in 2013, the most recent year for which the Institute had detailed data for the U.S., was more than triple Canada's rate. How is this? Well, most people imagine maternal mortality as a kind of 19th century style problem, hemorrhage in childbirth or death from eclampsia. But those types of deaths, while they still happen, their rate hasn't changed much. Instead, the increase in recent years has been driven by heart problems and other chronic medical conditions like diabetes, which has increased sharply in the population, particularly acute among poor black women who have much higher rates of maternal mortality than whites. The really scary thing to us is all the deaths from cardiovascular disease and heart failure, said Dr. William Callaghan, who runs the Maternal and Infant Health Branch in the Division of Reproductive Health at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's a quarter of all deaths. There were almost none in the remote past. So you have a combination of poverty-related disease like diabetes, compounded with cardiovascular disease and heart failure. Even if you limit the analysis to whites, we would still rank behind all other industrialized countries in terms of maternal mortality. The racial disparities are especially troubling, but they're only part of the story. And do you think, I do, that the clamping down on Planned Parenthood clinics all across this country had something to do with it? Well, yeah. Moving down across the border to Mexico, Donald Trump's friendly host, President Enrique Peña Nieto, is under a new assault and should be. International human rights officials are finally demanding an investigation into brutal sexual assaults of 11 Mexican women during protests a decade ago. The demand for this investigation is part of a multi-year examination by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights into abuses during a 2006 crackdown ordered by Mr. Peña Nieto on San Salvador Atenco, a town in Mexico State where demonstrators had taken over the central square. During the operations, which left 2 people dead from the police, more than 40 women were violently detained by the police and sent to jail. And the women, a mix of merchants, students, and activists, were then raped, beaten, penetrated with metal objects, robbed and humiliated, made to sing aloud to entertain the police, had to perform oral sex on multiple officers, and after they were imprisoned, days passed before they were given proper medical examinations, this new international commission found. Corruption scandals continue to dog his presidency, and of course his invitation to Donald Trump to come and visit didn't help matters much either. But the commission has called not only for a full investigation and not only denounced Mexico's efforts to investigate the abuse insufficient, but it called for disciplinary or criminal action against any authorities who contributed to the denial of justice for the women. The commission suggests that the state government under Mr. Peña Nieto minimized and even covered up the events. The state, in fact, initially prosecuted the women instead, rather than go after the police who committed the sexual torture. 5 of these women were imprisoned for a year or more on charges like blocking traffic. Days after the episode, the state denied the accusations of the women, called them liars, and said it was a known tactic of radical groups to have women make accusations of sexual violence to discredit the government. Since then, while this government has acknowledged the veracity of the accusations, that is, Peña's government, not a single person has been convicted of any crime related to the assaults in Atenco. More recently, 5 doctors charged with ignoring evidence of sexual abuse had their cases dismissed. Meanwhile, the women endured more than 10 years of threats, intimidation, and psychological trauma and watched as the men who had assaulted them walked free. But by God, they refused to drop the case, and the women pushed it to an international level, making it a symbol of the broken rule of law in Mexico. And now it is at an international level, and we're going to stay on this story. So as they say, watch this space. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Have you ever felt the need for a survival manual for a sexist workplace? I have. I don't think there's a woman alive who hasn't felt that. Well, we'll be back in just a moment with a woman who has written that survival manual. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Here's a fun interview. Jessica Bennett is an award-winning journalist and critic who writes on gender issues, sexuality, and culture. She's a feature writer and columnist at the New York Times, where you can regularly find her byline in the Sunday Style section. And she had worked at Newsweek, and she's a contributing editor at leanin.org. She has come out with a book that is called Feminist Fight Club, and it is terrific. And here's Jessica. Jessica, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You have written a funny, furious, fabulous, my goodness, the alliteration bug has caught me, book called Feminist Fight Club, an office survival manual for a sexist workplace. Who does not need that? And on the on the jacket, there's an asterisk saying, and if you look in small print at the bottom, it says, book is 21% more expensive for men. This is a witty, devastating, helpful, practical guide for survival in the office. You're a prize-winning New York Times journalist. How did you come to write this? From working at the New York Times, perhaps?
Well, that and my own personal experiences. You know, I've faced so many of the things I discuss in the book, all of these subtle forms of sexism that still exist in the modern workplace. And I feel like we're in this moment where we talk so much about the problem. You know, gender issues are very front and center right now, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of talk about solutions. And so I would find that I would be meeting with friends and talking about what we were facing. And then we would end the conversations by just being like, well, what do we do? Literally, what can we actually do? What can we say? How can we combat this?
Right.
And nobody really had any answers. So I started digging through research, mostly academic research, trying to pull out some solutions, and then, you know, trying to write them in a way that was a little bit fun.
Well, this is more than a little bit fun. I mean, the the names that you've assigned to the the sort of the various folks who operate to make women crazy in the workplace. The manterrupter, who interrupts you while you're speaking. The bropriator, who steals your ideas or else takes credit for them. The lact hater, who views the mom on your team as uncommitted to the job. And then, I mean, and on. But you also talk about, you know, what to do about them and about the self-sabotaging behaviors that we all as women have been made to internalize. You know, we're told we had to be like, you see that in Hillary. You know, nobody ever asks if Trump is likable or not. On the contrary, he's making headway precisely because he's not. There's this self-internalized, we have to be likable, we have to not take credit, we don't want to be braggy, you know, and you take on all of those. This is very valuable.
Well, and it's been so interesting to watch this campaign because it is almost as if Donald Trump is literally every caricature in this book. You know, he's interrupting. His wife is plagiarizing Michelle Obama's speech. He's appropriating it.
Yeah.
He's asking Megyn Kelly if she's bleeding out of her whatever. He says that motherhood is an inconvenience. You know, he falls into every single one of these caricatures. And then Hillary, on the other hand, is, you know, just constantly having to weave and duck and avoid these gender landmines, these very sexist traps and double standards and biases.
Right. And apologize for being informed, because that's become wonky. And, you know, and apologized for being steady and calm, because then that's dull and not entertaining. And, you know, I mean, it is an amazing inside out, upside down, through the looking glass world. There should be a feminist fight club for the campaign. But you know, really, I mean, but it is a practical manual that you've done. I have looked at this campaign sometimes and thought it's as if this is, you know, how they used to refer to the mother of all battles, and I've thought, but this is like the ultimate showdown between patriarchy and the women's movement. Because if you and I and a lot of feminists had got together and got absolutely whacked on champagne or whatever, our drug of choice, and tried to, you know, and invented a candidate like Trump, everybody would say it's over the top, that you're just exaggerating. Don't go there.
Yes.
This book will go, I think, a far way because of its humor, which I find, you know, comes in under the radar. The idea that feminists have no sense of humor is one of the worst perpetrated lies of all time.
Right. I agree. The funniest people I know are feminists. Well, you know, I took a lot of inspiration from your work. I think that the idea that we can't have humor and fight patriarchy at once is not true. And the humor, I hope, will open up some of these tricky issues to a larger audience and, you know, make some of the uncomfortable okay to talk about. Yeah. And I think we need to talk about these things if we're going to overcome them. But the humor was very important because I didn't want to be viewed as whining or screechy or shrill or all of those terms that we use to describe women who maybe complain. And so I took a lot of inspiration from women's groups of the past, many of whom you were involved with.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, which had a certain, you know, insouciance that was, you know, that was both fun and militant in its own way. And we always did, you know, we did the guerrilla theater, but then we did the guerrilla tactics underneath. So when we hexed the stock exchange, and at that point the stock exchange had real locks on real doors, when we went in with the press conference, we hexed it, and the doors, of course, wouldn't open, and they had to. The stock exchange was closed for 3/4 of that day because they had to take the doors off the hinges. No one knew, of course, that at 3:00 that morning, a few of us had quietly gone with crazy glue and oozled it into the locks. So the hex worked amazingly. But yeah, I mean, there's a way where if you can make people smile and laugh, there's a recognition connection there. And I hope the book will be a huge success. Is it on the bestseller list yet?
It's on the bestsellers on Amazon.
Okay.
Not on the New York Times yet. I'm working.
Okay. It's getting there. It's getting there. And give us an example of one or two of the strategies for surviving this. There are so many in the book.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff, it seems really simple when I say it, but it's the kind of thing that's really rooted in research. So the manterrupter, this is the guy who interrupts you when you're speaking, and this is a thing that really does happen. Women are twice as frequently interrupted than men are.
Yep.
So you can employ the method of having a wingman or a wingwoman who essentially becomes the interrupter of the interrupter. So they say, hey, can you let Jessica finish? And then, they're the nice guy because they're looking out for you. You get to say your piece. The other person shuts up. And you don't have to worry about falling into that female trap of being naggy or too sensitive when you're like, hey, can you shut up so I can finish what I'm saying?
Right.
So that is very effective. That also works in other scenarios, things like broappropriation where your idea is not being attributed back to you. Somebody else can just chime in and make sure that the people in the room know that the idea came from you. And there was actually a really interesting piece in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago about how the women of the White House actually employ these methods. They called it amplification. But what they found was that they would go into meetings, there wouldn't be a lot of women, and they would get interrupted and they wouldn't have their ideas heard. So they started bringing each other with them to each meeting so that there would be a critical mass of women in the room. They could back each other up. They would nod. They would say, that was a great idea from so-and-so, and their voices would be amplified. And so to me, it just goes to show, if the most powerful women in the most powerful office in the nation are having to employ some of these tactics, then the rest of us probably do too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an additional bonus about that because although tactically, you're doing it tactically to build support, it creates and fosters a sense of friendship, a sense of solidarity, dare I say sisterhood among the women in the office who, as Feminist Fight Club points out, need each other to stay sane because otherwise you just, it all must be just me, and that way lies madness.
And that was really the story behind this book in many ways, is my real-life Feminist Fight Club. It's a group that I've been meeting with since I began my career about a decade ago in New York, and most of us were all in very low-level assistant jobs or junior reporters. Some of us were stand-up comics, and we were all really struggling. But I think for a long time, much like your generation spoke about with click moments and the personal is political, a lot of us turned inward. We thought that the problem was ourselves, and we were in creative fields where it's pretty subjective. So, when I'd pitch a story and it would get rejected and then it would appear 2 months later in the pages of the magazine under a man's byline, it was very easy for me, it was very easy for me to think, well, maybe I just didn't pitch it right, or like maybe they didn't like the way I write. But we started gathering and we would meet. It was essentially a consciousness raising group. We would meet monthly, and throughout talking about these issues, we came to realize that this was not an individual issue. This is a collective issue, and this is a systemic issue. And if it was systemic, then we could fight it, and we could fight it together, and that we would always be more powerful together. So I think you're right, fostering and fueling this sense of sisterhood and knowing that we can have each other's backs. There's a term in the book that I call bitches.
Yes.
And this is the idea of finding a boast bitch who's a woman who's going to brag on your behalf. Because when women brag or self-promote, which is so necessary in the workplace because you need to have your work recognized, they're not liked, they're viewed as braggy or cocky, and they are penalized for it.
Right.
But what you can do is you can find another person to brag on your behalf, and you just have this unspoken agreement. You know, when you do something great, she's going to send out a mass note about it, and when she does something great, I'm going to do the same. And I've been thinking about this a lot in the context of the campaign because we have noted that when Hillary talks about her own accomplishments, people dislike her.
Yes.
But when she has all of these, like maybe Hillary just needs thousands and thousands of boast bitches to highlight her accomplishments so that she doesn't have to, so that we can get them out.
Right.
So I think that, you know, so much of this is about sisterhood and camaraderie and supporting one another, and that can truly be so powerful.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and also Hillary comes of a generation where women just didn't do that. She's a transitional woman in many ways. You know, we always said we are becoming the men we wanted to marry, and nothing could be truer of her. But you don't brag on yourself. You don't boast on yourself. So the idea of somebody else doing it for you, and that being seen by another woman who will come to bat for you and vice versa is in itself wonderfully subversive. This is just so. I want to thank you also, by the way, for your work, your extracurricular work, because I know that you are you're the co-founder and curator of the Lean In collection. This is Sheryl Sandberg's part of leanin.org, but it's the partnership with Getty Images, which is aimed to change the way women are depicted in stock photography, because Getty Images is a huge compendium of photographs that magazines and newspapers and people all over the world use, and it was sadly deficient in terms of female images. And I hadn't realized that you were the co-founder and the curator of the Lean In Getty Collection project. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you are so welcome. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the work that you've done with the Women's Media Center. But it's so true. We don't think about the imagery that we see every day, thousands and thousands of advertisements. And if those advertisements are showing women in, you know, support roles, not leadership roles, without agency, then it's sending a message.
That's right. Yeah, is it ever? And it's intended to. Well, if you want a funny, witty, smart, useful, interactive, you can pick it up in at any chapter and learn something, learn tactics, smile with recognition, laugh bitterly or more healthily, angrily. The book is called Feminist Fight Club, and the first rule of Feminist Fight Club is to talk about it. It's an office survival manual for a sexist workplace, Feminist Fight Club by Jessica Bennett, with whom we've been talking. Thanks, Jessica, and thanks for your good articles for the New York Times, but especially for this dynamite book. It is really awesome.
Thank you.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. You know, one of the bonuses of being a feminist is that there's always more to learn. You think after years and years of working at this that you kind of have an idea of the dimensions, breadth and width and depth of sexism. But no. Recently, in the New York Times of all places, there was a story that just stunned me, that I hadn't thought of this before. But trapped in toll booths, women toll takers are the targets of acute harassment. Who'd have thought that men were so crazy, that the world was so nuts? So they quote a woman named Ayanna Chisholm, who works for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who has learned to wear very little makeup, to crack her booth's window open as little as possible, and drop change into waiting hands to avoid drivers who stroke her palm. She says, they know I can't physically go after them. This is work, and I deal with it outside of work when I'm walking in the street. But to come to work and still have to deal with that, it's troublesome. I feel degraded. the approaches range from pickup lines to thrusting phone numbers at these women toll takers, and men bring gifts like perfume, flowers, and food, which the women didn't ask for and reject and don't want. There also are stares and filthy gestures, and there are drivers who expose themselves and then just blithely drive right on, feeling that they don't have to answer for this. Staffed toll booths have been dwindling with the advent of cashless tolls, but of the collectors who remain in the New York area, many are women, including a growing number of part-time workers who are drawn by the job's flexible schedules. The phenomenon is not new. One woman, Cindy Olson, said that when she worked on the Berkshire spur of the Thruway during college 20 years ago, she'd overhear truck drivers talking over the radio, passing along tips about certain young women at particular toll booths. It bothered me, she said, when my lane would be backed up and people would go to another lane. Who would think of this? Other tales of harassment are abundant on transportation worker message boards, but official reports of it are rare because, Sean McBride, a vice president with the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, that's an umbrella organization that represents toll workers across the country, said that although they know harassment is prevalent, workers often feel compelled to keep it to themselves or risk the ire of customers. Management, he said, tells the toll collectors, they're only in your lane for a couple of seconds. Smile, give them your change, and send them on their way. If we're told one more time to smile, my teeth are going to fall out, embedded in the person who tells me to smile. In Kansas, it's not unique to New York. In Kansas, the article cites a 2012 event that was a regular customer repeatedly showing explicit pictures to a toll booth collector and exposing himself to her. And so the police there set up a sting operation and caught him in the act. In Florida in 2008, a man who repeatedly passed through a female toll taker's lane without pants on was arrested after she called the authorities. And in South Korea, a 2011 survey of toll workers, most of them women there, found that about half or little more had been sexually harassed, and a third of those said they'd experienced drivers exposing themselves. This is amazing. This is outrageous. This is, surreal. Time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. There are parts of the world where girls, when they have their first menstruation, can't go to school because they are shamed, and they are shamed because there are no sanitary hygiene products available to them. So they stay home and miss school and drop out. But when we return, we'll talk with a woman who has done something about that.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest, White Mukuria, is a recognized leader in menstrual health and hygiene management who brings 14 years of senior-level leadership experience with nonprofits focused on women, girls, and communities to a problem that affects girls tremendously. She lives in Nairobi, Kenya, and she speaks to us about Zana Africa Foundation. Megan White Mukuria, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much.
You're doing very interesting work. Zana Africa Foundation, which you founded was 2007, yes?
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
2007.
and you there you are, an Ashoka Fellow and a graduate of Harvard, and you're working with Kenyan street children back in 2001, and something struck you that needed addressing. Tell us about that and the beginning of Zana Africa.
So I moved back to Kenya in 2001 after volunteering the summer of '98 and working with that same organization, trying to figure out how to unlock the most opportunity for the most girls. And I put together a budget for the organization, and I found out that our number one cost was bread, but the number two cost for girls was sanitary pads. And that completely floored me.
Yeah. So if there are no sanitary pads, of course, they can't go out, they can't go to school, they miss life because they're basically sequestered, and they're missing 6 to 8 weeks of school each year.
Absolutely. So it's a multiplicative challenge because at the onset of puberty is the time when girls have to, perform the best in education, but also when families are looking to marry them off or they have to take increased roles in the household. So it's so important that girls have reproductive health education and understand what's happening to their bodies, as well as have the tactical products that they can afford or that are provided for free by the people that care for them so that they can stay in school and focus and know their rights and be able to thrive. So what was really most interesting was coupling the pads and the health education to be able to create a systems change for girls across Kenya and beyond.
Wow. And how did you go about doing that? I mean, what is the health education? You do comics, don't you, or some version thereof?
Yeah, so it's been an exciting journey to really understand what do girls want to read, to listen to, how to stimulate their enthusiasm for what we're delivering, because so much is just talking at girls and not even giving them a safe space to ask the questions that they actually have. So over the last 7 years, we've been listening incredibly deeply to girls, and what started out as just a single-page, double-sided comic that would be put inside the pad package has evolved into a comic that's embedded in a magazine. So imagine if your reproductive health education was really fun, like a teen Vogue or something, but all very positive. And then coupling that with a text message tool that has a frequently asked question that can be more dynamic and that allows the girls to also test out different decisions that the characters make in the comics so that they can think through decisions but externalize that, not their own. So it's been a very robust solution.
And very smart. So the response from the girls has been strong and they love to interact. Tell us about that.
It's been so exciting to see these girls' faces just come alive as they're looking at these comics and as they're reading this material. We've had 65% knowledge retention or more. Girls have reported increased relationships that are positive with their girlfriends, increased ability to say no to negative peer pressure or to peer pressure by boys. And the community-based organizations that we also work with that support the girls have seen overall improvements in schools and in participation. So it's really looking at empowerment at a range of issues, but across the board, it's just been phenomenal. And even just, for example, we asked some of the girls, who do you think created these comics? And they said they thought boys did. And we said, well, why is that? And they said, well, because they're so beautiful. And that just floored me.
Yeah.
That girls didn't see that women could produce something that would just knock their socks off. So, that's why the magazine is so important, to really showcase all of these positive role models, to say, hey, look at all these amazing women and what they do, and you can be like that.
That's right.
And that's why our pads are called Nia, which means purpose, and the magazine's called Nia Teen, because we want girls to believe that they have a purpose and to see that modeled in different ways of how women are living out their own purposes. So that at this onset of puberty, they can start to really see a dream for themselves and step into that and overcome the barriers that they're undoubtedly going to face during adolescence.
This is beautiful work. Tell me, Megan, are you primarily operating in Kenya or elsewhere in East Africa? Right
now, we're only in Kenya, but we're in about 20 different communities around Kenya. We do have products that we sell in Uganda and South Sudan, but we have not yet started introducing our holistic approach that includes the comics there. We are, however, doing a 2-year randomized control trial on the comics and the SMS platform and the pads with the Gates Foundation that will be led by Population Council that will really show the impact of the work that we're doing and the cost efficacy, which will then allow us to scale, I think, much faster in a much more proven way. And that's what's so smart, I think, about the printed materials is you can really claim to know what impact is happening at scale.
Right. Well, and the printed materials, all not only obviously address menstruation, but the body itself. I mean, no one is relating to these girls, and they have no other way of learning to be not only not ashamed of their bodies, but proud of them. I mean, so you're making a very deep impression, I'm sure, that affects, if you hate your own body, it's very hard to like anything else about yourself. So it's a very core issue that you're addressing.
Absolutely. And even to understand the chemical changes that are happening during puberty. I mean, we get questions like, why am I angry at my mom all the time? Right? Because they don't recognize that there's actually a lot going on besides just bleeding. And so to have that powerful, positive connection with your own body and with other women is such a powerful tool for change. Right,
exactly. Tell me something. A while ago on the program, we talked with another woman who had founded an NGO working elsewhere in Africa, doing something not so much similar but related. It was distributing menstrual hygiene products to girls who otherwise had no way of going to school, no way of having any such product. But what she found, now maybe she was working more in the rural areas, what she found was that pads themselves, disposables in general, she was working with such poor cultures that the disposables, there was no place to put them, and they were too costly. And so that organization steered more in the direction of washable devices and cloths, which then in fact the women themselves wound up making. So it turned into a mini industry. Clearly you have found that the girls are able and willing to use pads, and that's the disposition is not a problem.
Yeah, so when you actually ask a girl what she wants, the answer might be very different than maybe what an NGO wants to give. So across the board, people want to use disposables. And when people ask me this question, I often ask, well, what products do you use? And I don't find that the answer is, oh, I use reusables and think everybody should too. We believe in dignity through choice, so we educate girls about all of the product options out there, and we work with CBOs to really think through disposable methods, because that is a very important thing. But a lot of the time, if you think about it, particularly in urban areas and peri-urban areas, girls don't have a safe space to dry their reusables. And so it's a very common thing that they get urinary tract infections or yeast infections. And the urinary tract infections are particularly insidious because they're not going to tell anybody. They think they have an STD. They're ashamed and embarrassed, and then they're going to get kidney infections and be in a really seriously negative health place. Right. So we believe that the disposables are the best for most of the conditions that girls are facing and the limitations that they have. Oftentimes mothers won't even let the girls use soap because they think that they waste it. And soap isn't biodegradable and things like that. So when you get into the nitty-gritty, it can be a much more difficult and nuanced situation, but we really believe in dignity through choice, and allowing the girls to be the decision makers when they understand what the choices are as to what solution they think will work best for them. That's terrific. And that's a very interesting and encouraging answer too. So the more options that a girl and a woman has, the better. This is very heartening. Tell us the website of Zana Africa, so that people can find out more about it, can contribute to it, can see if it can be of some help. Give us the website. Absolutely. So our foundation is www.zanaafrica.org, which is spelled ZANAAFRICA.org. And every $10 keeps a girl in school with a safe community-based organization pads, underwear, which is also critical, and health education. We also have a social enterprise that's zanaafrica.com that's working to integrate change in access through the market and to create kind of a buy one, give something within every purchase within East Africa as part of our self-sustainability work and part of our social change. So you can see the products and some of the branding that we've got on the .com and the whole work of the foundation and policy and health education and comics and such on the .org site.
ZanaAfricaFoundation.com and ZanaAfricaFoundation.org, doing excellent work. Thank you so much for this work, Megan, and for everything that you have been doing, and that clearly you're young and you're going to go on to do even better and greater things, but this is one hell of a good start. Thank you, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Robin. I'm excited for the journey ahead.
One last brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll return directly with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Something different this week. For a special, exclusive edition of Fighting Words, go to robinmorgan.net/blog and read what's there. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.